Okay. Good morning, everyone. How are we doing? So-so? Because of the weather, or yeah? I'm the extremely unusual Californian who loves gray, rainy weather. I guess maybe it wouldn't be so weird if I were from like the North Coast or something like that, up in the rainforest, but I am not. Other folks? Saw some nods, some thumbs up.
I love the rain.
You love the rain?
Yeah. So I'm with you.
Yeah, Zunya.
I like it when I don't have to go out. So it's just like when I stay in the dorm and then when the rain comes I can just
Oh,
go
you
out.
like watching the rain through your window. Yeah. Okay. Oh, I forgot to put a reminder for the speaker tomorrow. We'll do that real quick. Photo, by the way, is of Jasper supervising me when we built a patio in our backyard a couple of years ago. He's very good at supervision. So reminder for the talk tomorrow, Eddie M. Brown from San Jose State is coming to talk about authenticity and algorithmic filtering, the idea that our sense of self, our self-identity is shaped by the algorithms that shape our social media feeds. Looks very interesting. That's tomorrow afternoon starting at 3:30. Just up and over in the same building. So I encourage you all, if you might be interested in that, to come check it out. Then a couple of announcements, I guess technically 4, not a couple, from me. So first, I blasted out something over email, about 40 minutes ago or something like that. I have a conflict overlapping my regular Thursday student hours. So instead, today they're going to be 11 to 11:50 a.m. In the Lantern. So usual place, but half an hour earlier so I can make this meeting I have at noon. Second, you need to check whether you've completed the first quiz. This won't be a recurring issue, and with most of the assignments for the class, it will actually be very straightforward to tell whether you've completed the assignment because it will be marked complete or incomplete. But for the quiz, for a couple different reasons, you need to check this week. So the way you do that is here in CAT courses, we switch to the student view. Easiest way to do that is to go to modules. If you check just the quiz score, it won't tell you whether or not you're good. So you should go to modules right here. And you're looking for the rules 1 to 3 quiz, and you're looking for the green check mark at the right. So in this case, the pretend student account has completed the quiz. They got at least 10 out of 12 points on the quiz. And so the green check mark is right here. The test student account here is ready to move on to argument maps, so it is unlocked. But we haven't finished covering argument maps yet. We have today and then a bunch of stuff next week, so don't worry about that yet. If you do not have the green check mark here and argument maps is still locked, then that means you still need to work on this quiz. Polyphony and I have been doing some grading here and there over the week as people have been getting that turned in, which is fine. The sort of cutoff for this week is tomorrow at 6 p.m. And yeah, so if you still need to attempt it or you haven't passed yet, you have until tomorrow at 6 p.m. for this wave. And potentially you can ask questions related to that during discussion section tomorrow. We won't have time during lecture today. Or you can meet with us one-on-one. Any questions about that? Checking to see whether you still need to complete this first quiz. Okay. Just a note, please don't take the quiz again if you've already completed it. This isn't a huge deal because the quiz only takes you all a few minutes, and it only takes us a few minutes to check it over. But it is, a waste of people's time. It's a waste of your time because you've already passed the quiz. You don't need to take it again. And it's a waste of our time because we don't need to grade it again if you've already passed it. So please, you may see it on your to-do list as like an assignment that's due tomorrow. That should change starting next week. But for now, you may still see it there. So please check whether you've completed the quiz in the module section before you just see, oh, there's this quiz, I have to do it. Okay? Questions about that? Great. And again, the argument maps quiz, I believe, is open and available to you at this point, but don't worry about that until next week because that requires you to do some things that we're only going to start talking about today and we'll really be getting into next week. Any other questions about course logistics or events or anything like that before we get back into mapping arguments? Great. So, last time we spent most of the time learning how to map basic arguments. We started with just one premise, and then a few premises, and then as sort of a challenge that actually every group was able to meet by the end of class, we looked at this argument, which had not only multiple premises, but also multiple conclusions. We didn't have time to go over it, though, so I wanted to start by refreshing us on that. Yeah, so if we take this and put it into premise conclusion form, it looks like this here on the left. Premise 1, in 2012, NASA's Curiosity rover found rocks on Mars that have smooth, rounded pebbles embedded in them. We're not including sort of the background information or the context that there is this question about whether Mars ever had water on it, because that's not evidence one way or the other. That's just saying there is this question. So premise 1 is that these rocks were found. Premise 2, pebbles have that shape only if they have been in a stream or river that was flowing for a long time. These two premises working together support the first conclusion, that the pebbles must have been in a stream or river. And then that premise supports that first conclusion as a premise supports the second conclusion. Mars had flowing water at some point in the past. So this is it in premise conclusion form. And this is how we represent it as an argument map. So the first two premises, they need to work together to support the first conclusion. So we use the grouping box around both of them and a single arrow indicating that they support the first conclusion. And then the first conclusion provides direct support to the second conclusion. So this one in the middle is both a premise and a conclusion at the same time. But it supports the second conclusion, and so we have a second arrow pointing there. Any questions about this? Every group was here by the end of class last time. This is primarily just a refresher. But are there any questions from this? Okay, great. So now, pick this back up. Whoop. Okay. So this is the argument map. Question is, why don't we do something like this? Oh, come on. I want to go here. Whoops. It's all twitchy now. I think if I move this, there we go, okay. We could put boxes and arrows all over the place, right? We could try to put an arrow like this, running from this grouping box up here down to the second conclusion. Or we could try to put a bigger box around all of this and then draw an arrow there. That's not what we do. We don't do any of these things. We do this. So the question is, why? Why do we just have the one single arrow that goes from this thing that's both a premise and a conclusion, or the first conclusion down to the second conclusion? Why do we draw the arrow that way? Is the question clear enough, even if you don't have a good answer? Devin?
Because the first
I'm going to actually have you all talk in groups first. My question was just, is the question clear? Okay, it seems like people are good on the question. So we'll take a few minutes in groups. You can refresh yourselves rather than just having me talk at you. And then see if you can explain why we draw the second arrow here rather than like from the premises or from a big grouping box around the whole thing or something else. Okay, so we'll take a few minutes for you all to talk about that, wake up a little more, grab an apple, and then we'll pick this up again. let's come back together. So why do we draw the argument map this way rather than some other way? Why do we draw the second arrow there rather than someplace else? You're all talking about it. Yes. Oakley.
Say because the premises lead to the conclusion of the pebbles must have been in a stream of water. That conclusion also serves for premises of this confirms that Mars had flowing water at some point.
Yeah, good. So the third claim, I probably should have numbered these. The third claim, the pebbles must have been in a stream or river, is both a conclusion. It is supported directly by the first two claims, the rocks that were found by the Mars rover, and then sort of this, it's not exactly geology because it's not on Earth, but close enough, this kind of geological fact about what it takes for pebbles to have this shape, okay? So those two premises working together provide direct evidence that the pebbles must have been in a stream or river. So that's a conclusion, but it's also a premise because that, just by itself, if we bracket out, if we kind of ignore the first two premises, where did the evidence that if we ignore the question of why, let me start the sentence over again. Say we block off the first two premises, the evidence that supports the claim that the pebbles must have been in a stream or river. So we ignore that the rover found these pebbles and these facts about geology. We just have the claim by itself that the pebbles must have been in a stream or river. That by itself is enough to support the overall conclusion that Mars had flowing water at some point in its past. I see nods. Questions about that? Okay. So this is the case in which we do want to have kind of a sequence of arrows as we have conclusions that become premises for further conclusions. We sometimes will call these subconclusions, and the arguments that support them, nope, that's not going to work. The arguments that support subconclusions can be called subarguments. That's not terminology you have to really worry about a bunch, though. But in this case, where we have premises that support conclusions that then become premises that support conclusions, that's where we're going to have a sequence of arrows. We don't do that in a case where we have premises that are just premises, rather than a sequence of premise, conclusion, becomes a premise, becomes a conclusion. So on the left-hand side, underneath the X, we have the argument about Jasper's fuzzy tummy. Premise 1, Jasper is a cat. Premise 2, cats have fuzzy tummies. Conclusion, Jasper has a fuzzy tummy. So we looked at this last time. It was, I think, the first argument that we mapped. You might try to do something like the map on the left, where you have this premise, goes to or flows to, or the next step is premise 2, and then an arrow going to the conclusion, Jasper has a fuzzy tummy. That's wrong. That's why it has this big red X. The next question to talk about in groups is, why do we use sort of this sequence of arrows here in this argument, but not in the argument about Jasper's fuzzy tummy? Why do we want the sequence of arrows in this case, but not this case? What's different between these two arguments? Or you can also think of it as what goes wrong if we represent the argument about Jasper's fuzzy tummy using the sequence of two arrows. Question clear? Okay. Okay, so maybe we'll do the second version of the question first. So that version of the question was, what goes wrong if we use the map on the left for Jasper's fuzzy tummy? Devin, since you had an answer before, do you want to answer now?
I think I said that when it's arrows like that,
Uh-huh.
Jasper the cat doesn't support that Jasper has a fuzzy tummy.
Mm-hmm.
Only that supports that cats have fuzzy tummies. And then the second one, it's supporting that Jasper has a fuzzy tummy. I guess.
Yeah, good. So the map on the left says Jasper is a cat, and this is a reason to believe that cats have fuzzy tummies. The first problem there is that we don't have any information about whether or not Jasper has a fuzzy tummy. Right? So the fact that Jasper is a cat by itself doesn't tell us anything about whether or not cats have fuzzy tummies. Okay. So the first support arrow doesn't work because it's missing that information. And then the second arrow is saying, okay, ignore everything that came before. So in particular, ignore the fact that Jasper is a cat. If all we have to go on is that cats have fuzzy tummies, then we have a reason to believe that Jasper has a fuzzy tummy. But we've ignored the fact that Jasper is a cat. So the support arrow says, the stuff at my tail, taken all by itself, gives a reason to believe the stuff at my head, the stuff that I'm pointing to. cats have fuzzy tummies taken all by itself is a reason to believe that Jasper has a fuzzy tummy. But it doesn't. We need the fact that Jasper is a cat. So on the right-hand side, what we're saying is these two premises, that Jasper is a cat and cats have fuzzy tummies, we need these two premises working together to support the conclusion. Everyone good on the answer to the version of the question that is, what goes wrong with the map on the left? Okay, so the first version of the question, which we're answering second, is what's the difference between this argument about Jasper's fuzzy tummy and the argument about water on Mars? Why was the series of arrows appropriate for water on Mars, but doesn't work with Jasper's fuzzy tummy? What's the difference between them? Jonathan?
Well, all three premises support that final conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
The final conclusion, the middle conclusion
Yeah.
is not like a premise that's grouped in with the other two premises. It
Mm-hmm.
has to be supported by those two.
Yeah, good. So the difference is in the water on Mars argument, we had this intermediate conclusion or this subconclusion or this conclusion that was also a premise. So in this version, in this argument, we have a conclusion that is also a premise. So because it's a conclusion, it'll have an arrow pointing into it. And because it's a premise, it will have an arrow pointing out of it. But we don't have that with the argument about Jasper's fuzzy tummy. Jasper is a cat is just a premise. It's not supported by anything. Same thing with cats have fuzzy tummies. In this context, it's just a premise. It doesn't have any evidence or reasons to support it. Now, maybe we could go and do a survey of cats to see if they have fuzzy tummies. We could go and gather evidence that could then support claim 2. But with the argument as it's given, we don't. Every claim here is either a premise or a conclusion. We don't have any that are both. So that's the difference. In the case of the water on Mars argument, we had a claim that was both a premise and a conclusion. And in this case, we don't have any claims that are both. Any questions? Okay. So now we have some practice mapping single arguments. We're ready to move on to mapping debates. So remember, all the way back in prehistory, 2 weeks ago, when we started the class, we defined an argument as a collection of reasons given to support a claim. I think we should be pretty comfortable with that use of argument by now. We also defined a debate as an exchange of arguments, in this sense, for and against a claim between two or more interlocutors, where interlocutor is just a fancy word that means people talking to each other. Okay? Literally, that's what the Latin means, is people talking to each other. Okay, so now that we know how to map single arguments, like an argument from one side of a debate, we can bring in a second side of the debate. You could, in principle, do 3, 4, 5, however many sides of the debate if you really wanted to. We aren't going to be doing that because it would just make things more complicated and messy than we're going to bother with. So we can now move to mapping debates as an exchange of arguments for and against a claim between two or more interlocutors. A lot of students have had to write, well, everyone in high school had to write an argumentative essay, right? A paper that was giving an argument for a claim. Usually, you're also expected to include counter arguments or counters. Everyone familiar with these? Lots of nods. Yeah. Okay. We are going to be a little more sophisticated in the way we think about counter arguments or counters. Because with what we know so far, we know there are two ways you can challenge someone else's argument. You can challenge their conclusion, or you can challenge their premises. There's actually a third way. You can challenge the support relationship, but that's not something we're actually going to talk about in this class because it's really complicated without some tools, without some of the tools you get in other classes like, say, Phil 5. In our context, there are two ways you can challenge someone's argument. You can challenge their conclusion, or you can challenge their premises. And the blanket term counterargument is vague because it doesn't tell us which part of the argument is being challenged. So these are the terms we're going to use. Rather than counterargument, we're going to talk about an opposing argument or an objection. Or an opposing argument challenges the conclusion, while an objection challenges a premise. One more abstract bit, and then we will actually put all of these pieces into practice. When we represent these multiple sides in an argument map, again, we're just going to be working with two sides. We want to use different colors, and it's important to have contrasting colors. Red and green are often used as contrasting colors, but they're actually terrible because a fair number of people have red-green color blindness, and so they can't tell that apart. So we're going to use blue and red. Generally, blue will mean the pro side of the debate, and red will mean the con side of the debate. But there's going to be a slide at the end today about how the sides are kind of arbitrary, like how you label them. But two colors, blue and red, and we're going to color the different parts of the map based on whether this is coming from the blue side or the red side. We're also going to have different kinds of arrows. We want one kind of arrow to represent support relationships. This claim gives a reason or evidence to accept the claim it's pointing to, but also challenge relationships. This claim or the set of claims gives a reason to reject the claim they're pointing to. We're going to do that with a combination of how we draw the line on the arrow, solid versus dashed, and also the arrowhead we put on the end, like the regular pointed one versus something like an X or a bar, sort of indicating that this is blocking the thing it's pointing to. And we can put these together to get 4 different combinations. We can have pro-arguments that support a claim, or pro-arguments that challenge a claim. Similarly, con-arguments that provide support for a claim, and con-arguments that challenge a claim. This is abstract. We're going to get concrete in a moment, but are there any questions at the abstract level? Okay. Here's an example we're going to use. This is a debate kind of happening all over the country right now. More or less settled in California at this point in time, although there's some potential complications related to some of Trump's recent executive orders. Question: should K through 12 teachers be required to tell parents when their children want to use names or pronouns that don't match the official records? The pro side, among other arguments, gives this argument. Parents should be notified when their children are experiencing mental health issues So teachers should be required to tell parents when their children want to use different names or pronouns. Con side, forcing trans and non-binary youth to come out will increase the risk of abuse, neglect, and suicide. So teachers should not be required to tell parents when their children want to use different names or pronouns. Okay. I don't think we need to worry about that. So to map this, this is really short. Did I want to do this as an exercise? Yeah, we can do this. Oh, I know what we can do. Okay. Let's start with Pro. Over here in Miro. Okay. That's super tiny. Sorry. Okay. The Pro side, we're going to do just the way that we've done before, that we started working on Tuesday. Can someone walk me through mapping this argument? Ayush?
There's just one premise. Parents should
Yep.
be notified when their children are experiencing mental health issues.
Mm-hmm. And of course, this is all weird. Okay, let's make the font a little larger and the box there and everything blue. And the box a little more reasonable size.
There's also an implied premise here.
Okay.
Children have mental health issues when they want to use different names or pronouns.
Yeah, good. I'm not going to include it right now since our focus here isn't on implied premises and conclusions. But yeah, this does involve an implied premise that connects mental health issues to wanting to use different names or pronouns. Good. What we do have is the conclusion. Just like this. I'm going to do this. And that. Oh. And I'm going to make this blue as well. Very simple. What we're doing at the beginning on Tuesday. Any questions about this? Okay. So now we're going to include the con side. We'll go ahead and just do this. So the premise here, like the first argument, this was just a single premise. So I could put it like this, but now I want to indicate that this is coming from the opposite side of the debate. This is coming from the con side. So I'm going to put this into red. I'm going to draw the arrow. This arrow is coming from the con side, so I'm going to put it in red. And I need to show that it's opposing. So I'm going to make it dashed. And I'm also going to change the arrowhead. Miro, unfortunately, I really like putting an X at the end, and Miro doesn't have a good way to do that. So in Miro, I use this like double arrow, or this double dash thing. And if there's a way to make it a little thicker right here, that can be helpful with the opposing ones, just because the symbols are a little smaller. Okay, so what I have here is this debate over disclosing students' preferred names and pronouns. On the one hand, I have the pro argument, the argument that teachers should be required to disclose. I've represented that in blue with the support arrow in blue, solid, regular arrowhead. Over here I have an opposing argument which challenges the claim that teachers should be required. It uses what we'll call a challenge arrow. Since it's coming from the con side, it's in red. It uses a dashed stalk of the arrow and something that's not pointing, but instead indicating is like blocking off for the arrowhead. Questions about this example? Okay, so since I didn't realize, I don't know quite what I was thinking here, and didn't give you all some good examples to work with. I'm going to convert some things from the reading. Okay, let's actually move this over first. I will actually do that while you all are working. Okay. Okay, so you can check these very quickly against the notes. Maybe you've already read them. That's fine. It's just the most convenient thing for me to have you practice on. Sorry, I kind of messed up this. First argument to practice on is actually taken from a sample essay I found on like a writing advice site that kind of talked about counter arguments. These are opposing arguments. Admittedly, many students would like to smoke on campus. Some people may rightly argue that if smoking on campus is not illegal, then it should be permitted. However, secondhand smoke may cause harm to those who have health issues like asthma, possibly putting them at risk. Let's just make this explicit. Therefore, smoking should not be allowed. there's the conclusion. There are actually 3 arguments in this example, in this little debate, for and against this conclusion that smoking should not be allowed. And then next week, we're going to be looking at a more complicated debate over abortion and mapping that out. But for now, you can start with this exchange between a pro-choice person and a pro-life person. Everyone has a right to bodily autonomy, so abortion should be legal. Pro-life position. An embryo has a right to life from conception, so abortion should be illegal. So we have 2 debates. You can practice constructing maps like this. Okay. And I will, once you all get settled, I will put this onto the slides as a reference. Any questions about what I'd like you to do for the next few minutes? Okay, great. Oh, and I will give you Okay, let's come back together. I'm going to do this real quick. So you got that in the slides. Yeah, so let's take a look at the smoking on campus example. Would some group like to volunteer to share? Yeah, I kind of thought it would be 8. Okay. So I think if I do that and that. Oh, and I think I can also do that.
All right, so we have 2 premises listed here. The first of which is the against premise from the conclusion, which is if smoking on the campus be not unlawful, then it ought to be permitted, which opposes the conclusion of therefore smoking should not be allowed. While the supporting premise is the smoke of others may bring harm to those afflicted with ailments such as asthma.
Okay. So, 2 things.
Yeah.
While this is aesthetic, I can't read it. That is helpful. Okay. Next thing, in 2 weeks, we'll talk about paraphrasing. So you've paraphrased for comedic effect, which is fine for right now. In general, though, we want to avoid paraphrasing sort of unless it's necessary. Because we need to be very careful that we're not accidentally changing the meaning of what someone is saying when we're working with their argument. Okay. In this case, no major changes. I don't think. Now that everyone can read this. Any questions or comments? There are a few potential concerns with this. Something is missing.
I mean, truly, I'm at a loss of what could be missing.
It is, in some sense, glorious. In some sense. Something is missing, and then I would need to double check something about the colors. Devin.
I think it's the bar or the X on the end of the arrowhead that they're correcting right now.
Okay. Whoever's driving, can you all zoom in again?
We just made the arrowheads hollow. There's no X option here either.
Okay. Yeah. So one issue here is that they both have pointy arrowheads. And it could potentially be kind of confusing which arrow is the support arrow versus a challenge arrow. So that may be a limitation of the particular software you're using here. I like to see kind of redundant coding of these sorts of visual elements, right? So that's why I like the dash line, and then, yeah, the X at the end, and if you can even make it like extra big or something. So that would be good. Okay, yeah, that's better. I want to talk about the conclusion here. Let me double check what we have on the slides. Smoking should not be allowed. Okay, so that's the version of the conclusion on the slides. And Yes, smoking should be banned on campus is the version in the notes. But we could go the other way. We could have the conclusion be smoking should be allowed. How would that change this argument map if we switch the conclusion smoking should be allowed? You two are great. Maybe somebody over here. How would we change the map if we change the conclusion to smoking should be allowed?
We would just flip the arguments. So instead of the dash line being on smoking upon campus be not unlawful, then it ought to be permitted, it would be the blue line with the solid because it's agreeing with the smoking should be allowed because of this, whereas the other one would be disagreeing with it because it costs $700.
Yes, good. So if we switch the conclusion from should not be allowed to allowed, we need to flip the arrows. We would need to turn the, if it's not unlawful, ought to be permitted, that becomes a support arrow. The other one becomes a challenge arrow, so we need to flip the arrows. Would we need to change the color of anything? Jonathan?
I think the easy way to do it, if you change the conclusion, swap the text of the boxes, because now the argument is that smoking should be allowed. So
Okay.
all arguments for that are the pro side, and all arguments against that are the con side. So I feel like the other side would be red now. Like what we have on the blue side right now would be red.
Yeah. I'm realizing this is hard to explain without having the argument up. So actually, I'm going to pull everyone back. And turn that off and do that. No, I'm going to do this. Okay. So now everyone except the TV that wasn't working. Okay, it's back on my slides. Which side is pro? Oh, I've only got like a minute or two left. Yeah, okay, we can do this in a minute. So this is back in the context of the trans disclosure debate. Which side of this debate should we consider pro or not? The pro side, so the original version of the conclusion here is that teachers should disclose when students want to be called by different names or use different pronouns. The pro side might consider themselves pro-parents or pro-mental health. What we have is the con side could also present themselves as pro. They could present themselves as pro-trans or pro-mental health. With the smoking example, those in favor of allowing smoking could present themselves as like pro-smoking or pro-freedom, whereas those who are opposed to smoking could represent themselves as pro-mental health. So which side we label pro and con is generally arbitrary. The colors are also arbitrary. I tend to use, like as a convention just for myself, pro is the side matching the conclusion and I make it blue, and red or con is the other side, but you could go the other way around so long as you're consistent. If you make the conclusion red, then that is the pro side and you could use red for the pro side consistently. It's up to you. I think it's probably going to be easier for me in Polyphony if you use pro is blue, matches the conclusion. Con is red, rejects or challenges the conclusion in some way or another. But that is not like a strict rule the way things like grouping boxes and the way we draw arrows are. Okay. This last point we will pick up on Tuesday. Next week, So today we were just mapping opposing arguments. These are arguments that directly challenge the other side's conclusion. Next week, we're going to start mapping objections, and we'll look at a little corner of the abortion debate, mapping an exchange of objections on either side of that. If you don't normally read the notes in advance, I recommend taking a look at them for next week, because we're sort of dealing with a series of philosophical arguments, and it'll help you understand and follow things better if you've taken a look at those in advance. Okay. Any 30-second questions? Excellent. Great work this week. Have a great rest of your Thursday and a great weekend, and we will see you on Tuesday.